As you know, I'm here on behalf of my family for the purpose of expressing what we believe is the true character of my father.
The world called O.J. Simpson a killer. His daughter called him Dad. For 30 years, she stayed silent. But after O.J.'s death, Sidney Simpson did something no one expected. Something that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about that night. And we are forced to ask, did she confirm the truth the world suspected all along? The night that changed everything. June 12, 1994. It was a warm Sunday night in Los Angeles, the kind of night when nothing seems out of place. But before the sun came up, the world would know the name Simpson for all the wrong reasons. At 875 South Bundy Drive, 2 lives were lost, and 2 young lives were changed forever. That evening, Nicole Brown Simpson had gone out to dinner with her family and friends at Mezzaluna, a small Italian restaurant. She was calm and smiling, even telling her mother that O.J. Simpson would always be her soulmate. But behind that smile was fear. Nicole had lived through years of pain that few people knew about. Back in the late 1970s, O.J. and Nicole's relationship had been passionate but stormy. Friends said they couldn't stay away from each other even when things got bad. Over the years, neighbors had heard shouting, crying, and the sound of things breaking. Police were called to their home many times, but nothing really changed. But in one call, Nicole was found hiding outside, bruised and terrified, telling officers that she thought O.J. was going to kill her. In 1989, O.J. was arrested for domestic violence. He pleaded no contest and was sentenced to community service and probation. Still, Nicole stayed, hoping things would get better. But by 1992, she filed for divorce. She had discovered that he'd been seeing another woman. Friends said she wanted peace, and she wanted to raise her children, Sydney and Justin, in a calm home. For a while, things seemed chill, but by 1993, the fighting started again. Nicole told her friends that she was scared. Her close friend Kris Jenner later said that Nicole had once told her, "He's going to kill me, and he's going to get away with it." Another friend said O.J. had warned Nicole that if he ever caught her with someone else, he'd hurt her. Still, Nicole tried to build a normal life. She spent her days taking Sydney to dance class and Justin to school. On the outside, she was the picture of a loving mom. Inside, she carried the weight of fear and exhaustion. But at least, for a while, life looked normal, until the night everything changed. That June night, Sydney, 8 years old, and Justin, 5, were already asleep upstairs when Nicole got home. The lights were still on, and the air was still, but outside neighbors soon heard strange sounds like a dog barking, voices raised, and a very sudden silence. Not long after, 2 lives were gone. Nicole and her friend Ron Goldman were found near the walkway of her home. The scene was violent, tragic, and confusing. Officers rushed in and carried the 2 children out. Sydney was still asleep, unaware that everything she knew had just been torn apart. By morning, the news had spread across the country. The cameras came and reporters filled the street. And just like that, it changed from being just a crime to a full-blown spectacle. Everyone wanted to know who did it, and soon all eyes turned toward O.J. Simpson. For Sydney, none of it made sense. She was just a little girl who had lost her mother overnight. People would argue for years about what really happened that night, but for her, the truth was simply that her mom was gone, and her father was now at the center of a storm that would never end. Sydney's life, once private and full of bedtime stories and laughter, became something else entirely. The cameras followed her family everywhere. Her name was mentioned in newsrooms, printed in papers, and shown on TV screens. She was too young to understand what a trial even meant. All she knew was that her family was broken, and the world wouldn't stop talking about it. That night didn't just take away Nicole Brown Simpson, it took away Sydney's childhood. And as the police began to point fingers and lawyers started preparing their cases, the little girl who once slept peacefully upstairs would soon find her entire life placed on display. Because what came next was a storm that would steal Sydney Simpson's innocence forever. The trial that stole a childhood. The morning after Nicole and Goldman were found, Sydney and Justin's lives had become front-page news. Their mother was gone, their father was accused, and the world was about to turn their family tragedy into a television event. What started as a crime scene soon became one of the biggest stories in American history. After O.J. Simpson's arrest, the case moved quickly. Cameras followed every move, from the white Ford Bronco chase on live television to his first court appearance. Millions of people watched as he stood before the judge, once a football hero, now a man accused of double homicide. Inside the courtroom sat some of the most famous lawyers in the country, and outside stood the flashing lights of hundreds of cameras. The world called it the trial of the century. The courtroom itself became a stage. O.J.'s defense team, famously called the Dream Team, included well-known lawyers like Johnny Cochran, Robert Shapiro, F. Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, and his close friend, Robert Kardashian. On the other side was the prosecution, led by Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden, both determined to prove that Simpson was guilty. The judge, Lance Ito, was calm but serious. He knew that the whole world was watching. The trial officially began in January 1995 and lasted for 10 long months, making it the longest trial in California history at that time. The jury was made up of 12 people, 10 of them black, and they were kept away from their families for 266 days. It was a record that still stands. For most people, it was a court case. But for 8-year-old Sydney Simpson, it was her entire childhood being dissected on live TV. Suddenly, she couldn't go to school like other kids. She couldn't play outside without someone pointing or whispering. Reporters waited outside her grandmother's house, hoping to snap a photo. When her father appeared on TV, people took sides, some saying he was innocent, others saying he was guilty. Sydney, too young to understand the legal details, only knew that her family was being torn apart in public. Inside the courtroom, the case took many turns. The prosecution believed they had a strong case. They showed DNA evidence, including blood from both Nicole and Goldman found in O.J.'s car, Nicole's blood on his socks, and gloves that seemed to link him to the scene. Of all the evidence found, the pair of black gloves held so much significance. One was found at the crime scene and the other was at O.J.'s house. The prosecution said the gloves were a match. They pointed to blood on the gloves, fibers that tied them to the victims, and traces that connected the gloves to a car and to O.J. To the prosecution, the gloves were a direct link between Simpson and the crime. But the defense had a different story to tell. They said the police handled evidence badly, and that some photos and items were lost or mislabeled. They also said one of the officers who found the glove at Simpson's house, Mark Fuhrman, hated Simpson and could have planted evidence. That idea made the jury question everything the police had done. The whole glove saga led to one of the most unforgettable moments in courtroom history. O.J. was asked to put on the glove in court, but it wouldn't fit. It looked too small, and Johnny Cochran turned that moment into a line that would live forever. "If the glove don't fit, you must acquit." It was the kind of phrase that made headlines around the world. The prosecution tried to argue that the glove had shrunk after being soaked in blood and frozen multiple times. They also said Simpson had arthritis and might have had swelling in his hands on the day he tried the glove in court. The defense answered with jail records that showed he had been taking medication there. An executive from the glove company later said a newer extra-large pair could fit Simpson, which added more confusion. Experts, witnesses, and a long debate about lab work followed. But the moment on stage, with Simpson struggling with the glove, gave the jury a strong visual that the defense used well. Many jurors later said they felt doubt because of the glove scene and because of questions about the police. That doubt meant the prosecution's case did not meet the standard of proof the law requires, and that single moment changed how people saw the entire trial. For Sidney, that moment wasn't about law or evidence, but it was about watching the world cheer, laugh, and argue over the man she called Dad. Even in private, family members said she often looked confused, unsure of what to feel. Her mother was gone, her father was in court every day, and the adults around her whispered things she couldn't fully understand. At the time, the trial seemed to not be just about O.J., but also about America itself. This was a time when the country was already tense about race and justice. Just a few years earlier, Los Angeles had exploded in riots after the police who beat Rodney King were acquitted. The city was still hurting, and the Simpson trial reopened those wounds. Many Black Americans saw O.J. as a symbol of racial bias in the justice system, while many white Americans saw the case as proof that fame could buy freedom. The defense lawyers knew this. They showed how one of the detectives investigating the case, Mark Fuhrman, had a history of using racist slurs. When Fuhrman was caught lying about it, the defense claimed that the police could have framed Simpson. It made the jury question everything. As juror David Aldana later said, "On the evidence they gave me to evaluate, it was crooked by the cops." This doubt was enough to change history. Back at home, Sidney lived with her grandmother, Juditha Brown, who tried to shield her and Justin from the chaos. Even when reporters would try to get a statement, her grandmother would say, "We don't talk about the case." And they didn't. But Sidney still saw it all. The TV news, the magazines at the grocery store, the whispers from neighbors. It was everywhere. Her childhood wasn't about cartoons or friends. It was about headlines, lawyers, and court dates. As months went by, the world became obsessed. Every day, there was new evidence, theories, and new arguments. People talked about the trial at work, at dinner tables, even in schools. It became entertainment. But for the Simpson children, it was trauma they had to relive over and over. In October 1995, after 11 long months, the jury reached a verdict. Not guilty. Those two words shocked the nation. Over 100 million people watched it live. In offices and classrooms, people screamed, cried, or cheered. Some called it justice. Others called it failure. It split the country in half. Inside her grandmother's home, Sidney was too young to grasp what those words really meant, but she could feel the agitation. She might not have known what "not guilty" meant legally, but she knew it meant her father would come home, and that not everyone was happy about it. In later interviews, some jurors defended their decision. Yolanda Adams, one of them, said she still believed they made the right call, explaining that reasonable doubt was too strong to ignore. But outside the courtroom, many still believed O.J. was guilty. That tension followed the Simpson family for decades. After the verdict, O.J. was released after 474 days in custody. Cameras followed him again as he walked out a free man. But freedom didn't bring peace to his children. The media storm only grew louder. Publishers and producers rushed to profit from the case. O.J. himself later released a controversial book titled If I Did It, which described how the murders might have happened hypothetically. Members of Nicole Brown's family, including her sister Denise, gave interviews to keep her memory alive and to speak against domestic violence. Some former lawyers like Robert Shapiro and F. Lee Bailey also appeared in documentaries and talk shows reflecting on the trial. And through all of these, Sidney and Justin were the two innocent faces connected to one of the most controversial cases in history. But after a discussion, the Browns and Simpsons eventually reached an arrangement. Sidney and Justin would stay with their grandmother for a while. The idea was to give them some space, to let them live away from the noise. But how do you escape a story the whole world is still watching? Growing up in the shadow of a verdict. By the late 90s, the Browns decided that the only way for the children to heal was to move away from California completely. They chose Florida, a place far from Los Angeles and the memories that haunted every street. There, Sidney and Justin could go to school, take walks, and grow up without cameras following them. There, they could finally find some peace from all the drama. In Florida, Sidney's life became quiet. She stayed out of sight, and the family made sure reporters couldn't find them. Few photos exist from those years, and that was by design. The Browns wanted the children to have the privacy they had lost. Sidney learned early that silence was her shield. She also started therapy to deal with what she had seen and felt. Her sessions focused on fear, loss, and confusion. Her teachers were said to have noticed her reserved nature. She was polite, always respectful, but distant. She didn't join group activities and preferred to sit at the back of the class. Even at a young age, she seemed older than her years. She didn't laugh as often as other children did. The world around her kept bringing up the trial, the headlines, the tapes, and the old photos of her parents. Sidney never spoke about any of it. She didn't correct people when they said false things. She didn't try to explain her side. She just stayed silent. She knew that no matter what she said, the world had already decided who her father was, who her mother was, and who she was supposed to be. That silence became her way of surviving. She didn't seek attention or sympathy. She just wanted to be normal, even if the world wouldn't let her. But as the years passed, it became clear that hiding wouldn't erase her past. The last name Simpson followed her everywhere. By the time she entered her teenage years, Sidney was ready to start fresh. So when her family decided to move again, this time for high school, Sidney saw a small chance to finally live life on her own terms, searching for normal in a different world. In the early 2000s, Sidney began a new chapter in Florida. She enrolled at Gulliver Preparatory School, one of the top private schools in the area. To other students, she may have looked like any teenager trying to fit in. Few knew her story, and that was exactly how she wanted it. At school, Sidney stayed polite and focused. Teachers described her as bright but reserved. She did her homework, never missed classes, and always stayed out of trouble. She wasn't the type to raise her hand in class or talk about herself. Most of her classmates didn't even know who she really was until much later. Sidney kept her last name private whenever possible. In school records, she used her full legal name, but she avoided saying it aloud. Some classmates may have commented that she looked familiar. A few may have guessed the truth. But when questions came, Sidney was said to deflect and change the subject. She never joined clubs, sports, or school plays. Anything that could bring cameras or crowds made her uncomfortable. She had already seen what attention could do, and she wanted no part of it. She just wanted peace. But being invisible usually comes with a price. It is plausible that Sydney would sometimes feel lonely. Even though she had classmates, very few became real friends. She didn't talk about her past, and that made her seem distant. So even though people may have liked her, they didn't really know her. By the time she finished high school, Sydney had built a bubble of calm around her. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She had survived childhood in the shadow of a national scandal and managed to find a small piece of stability, a new identity at Boston University. By 2004, Sydney Simpson had lived more than enough life for someone her age. The little girl who once hid from cameras was now a young woman walking through the gates of Boston University. When she left for university, it was her first real step into the world on her own. College gave her something she had never truly had before, and that was a chance to start fresh, far from the weight of her last name. In Boston, few people recognized her. She introduced herself simply as Sydney, not Sydney Simpson, and that small difference meant a lot. She chose to study sociology, a field that focused on people, behavior, and society. Some believed she picked that path to understand the things she had seen and lived through. Others thought she simply wanted to help people. Whatever her reason, she stayed focused on her work and stayed out of the spotlight. At school, she kept her circle small. She had classmates and study partners, but very few knew her full story. She avoided conversations about family and rarely shared personal details. Most who met her just saw a normal student who kept to herself and worked hard. Professors were known to describe her as dependable and serious about her studies. Sydney learned how to blend in. She walked to class, spent time at the library, and lived like any other student. There were no cameras, reporters, and no reminders of her past. For the first time, she was known for her effort, not for her father's name or her mother's tragedy. Some people later said that Boston became her safe space. It was where she began to build her confidence again through study, work, and a simple daily routine. There were never any reports of her going to parties or trying to stand out. Instead, she worked part-time jobs to support herself and stayed focused on her degree. By the time she graduated in 2010, Sydney had earned a bachelor's degree in sociology. It was a major achievement, not only for her education, but for her healing. After years of running from her past, she had proved something important to herself, that she could move forward, even if the world still saw her as O.J. Simpson's daughter, building a life of her own. After graduating from Boston University, Sydney moved back to Florida to start a new chapter. She wanted to work, earn her own money, and live life on her own terms. Her brother Justin was already living there, and the two supported each other as they adjusted to adulthood. Sydney started small. Her first jobs were in the service and property industries, where she learned how to manage homes, handle clients, and take care of maintenance details. Those early years taught her responsibility and business sense. She worked hard, saved her earnings, and soon began thinking bigger. Over time, she entered the real estate business. She started managing rental properties in the St. Petersburg area and eventually built her own small company. She handled everything herself, from finding tenants to collecting rent and maintaining the homes. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave her independence and financial stability. Her business grew slowly but steadily. Sydney bought a few properties under her own name and turned them into rentals. She paid attention to every detail, making sure her tenants were comfortable and that her properties stayed in good condition. Local property records later showed that she owned several houses, which she managed as part of her company, Simpson LLC. People who dealt with Sydney through work described her as calm, professional, and reliable. She was the kind of person who returned calls on time and solved problems without drama. To most of her clients and neighbors, she was simply a hard-working woman running her own business, not the daughter of a man once at the center of one of America's biggest scandals. Her brother Justin also went into real estate, and the two often worked in similar areas. They shared a strong bond, both personally and professionally. While Sydney focused more on property management, Justin leaned toward renovation and sales. Together, they formed a partnership that helped both of them stay grounded and build careers they could be proud of. As the years passed, Sydney's work became her main focus. She learned how to navigate the housing market, deal with tenants, and handle legal paperwork. Her properties became a source of steady income and a sign of how far she had come since her college days. Her success didn't make headlines, but it gave her a sense of accomplishment. She had built something real from the ground up, a business, a home, and a life that she managed herself. For someone who had spent her childhood surrounded by things she couldn't control, that meant everything. So her career was finally on track, and life felt stable for the first time in years. But even success couldn't fill the space that only love could reach. Love and loss. Sydney has always kept her personal life away from the public eye, but a few details about her relationships have been known over the years. Around 2007, she began dating Stuart Alexander Lee, a man she met while living in Atlanta. The two were together for several years and were often seen attending events or running errands side by side. Unfortunately, the relationship hit some roadblocks along the way and ended around 2012. Those who knew them said Sydney and Stuart cared deeply for each other. They lived together for some time, and friends described their relationship as steady and supportive. Stuart once said in an interview that Sydney was strong and hardworking, but cautious about trusting people. He mentioned that she stayed focused on building her future and avoided anything that might bring unwanted attention. After their breakup, Sydney did not date publicly again. There have been no confirmed reports of another long-term relationship, marriage, or children. She has kept her private life separate from her professional and family ties, and there is little public record showing that she has started a family of her own. Sydney has spent much of her adult life working and building stability for herself. Her dedication to her work, her business ventures, and the properties she manages have been her main focus. She appears to value independence and chooses to keep her circle small. Those close to her say she enjoys normal things like cooking, reading, and spending time at home. But she doesn't share these moments publicly. Despite living a largely private life, Sydney's story has drawn attention from those curious about how she found love after growing up under such public circumstances. Yet, what stands out most is her ability to move forward without letting public curiosity define her choices. She has never spoken openly about her past relationships or how they influenced her views on love. But just as Sydney had found peace in her own rhythm, the past resurfaced in a way she couldn't ignore. The death of O.J. Simpson and Sydney's revelation. On April 10, 2024, O.J. Simpson passed away in Las Vegas at the age of 76. His family confirmed in a social media post that he succumbed to cancer after a battle with the disease, asking that people respect their privacy. He had been diagnosed with prostate cancer and had been receiving treatment. In the months before his death, he kept a low profile, but the news still shocked many. In those final days, reports indicate that all of his children visited him. Sydney was among them. While many news outlets say the children came, they do not give full details of what was said or how long those visits lasted. After he died, Simpson was cremated on April 17th in a private ceremony in Las Vegas. No public memorial was held. The attorney overseeing his estate confirmed that only a few people were present, but would not name everyone. Public reaction to his death was mixed. The Goldman family, relatives of Ron Goldman, the 25-year-old waiter who was murdered alongside Nicole Brown in 1994, released a statement saying, "The news of Ron's killer passing away is a mixed bag of complicated emotions and reminds us that the journey through grief is not linear. For 3 decades, we tirelessly pursued justice for Ron and Nicole, and despite a civil judgment and his confession in If I Did It, the hope for true accountability has ended. We will continue to advocate for the rights of all victims and survivors, ensuring our voices are heard both within and beyond the courtroom. And despite his death, the mission continues. There's always more to be done. Thank you for keeping our family, and most importantly, Ron, in your hearts for the last 30 years." Nicole Brown Simpson's sister, Denise Brown, also spoke publicly, reflecting on the decades of loss. She said, "Nicole's life was stolen from her, and while her abuser is finally gone, it doesn't take away the anguish we feel or the pain of her children who lost their mother." Those words reminded the public that behind every headline was a family still carrying deep pain. From all public records, Sidney Simpson has not made any public comment about her father's passing. She did not issue statements, give interviews, or attend any memorials as far as reports show. That absence itself carries weight. In a life where so much has been spoken about her family, through trials, books, and documentaries, her silence is especially loud. Reports from those close to the family reveal that Sidney had long cut personal ties with her father. She built her life under her own name, with no public connection to O.J.'s estate or brand. While rumors swirled of inheritance disputes, Sidney's consistent silence and independence confirmed her moral distance. She appeared determined to protect her peace and identity, far from the shadow of the Simpson name. Some see that silence as her way of speaking. Rather than engage in debate or be pulled into headlines again, she has chosen to remain detached from it all. She has usually liked letting her actions, not her words, be her statement. After witnessing so many versions of her father's life told by others, she may feel that not adding her voice is the clearest boundary she can draw. Even as news programs replayed footage of the trial and analysts revisited old arguments, Sidney's name came up in stories, but not by her choosing. Her presence in the public eye remained minimal, and in that, she affirmed something. She will not be part of the spectacle. What are your thoughts on this? Did Sidney Simpson just confirm her father's guilt without saying a word? Or is her silence her way of trying to move on from a past the world refuses to forget? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.